Hi and welcome to the 7th episode of the 365 Days of Compassion video series, taking a look at compassionate mind training and some of the exercises and core concepts from that. I'm Chris, I'm not an expert, I'm sharing what I've discovered about the compassionate mind as part of compassion focused therapy. My hope is that these videos will provide an insight into CMT/CFT and support somebody who's either learning about it, and perhaps it might inspire you to find out some more about compassionate mind training. It can be very helpful to have the support of a therapist or to do that within a group, and there's nothing at all wrong with seeking help from a therapist. In some ways I wish I had done that sooner. So in this episode, which actually I'm pretty excited about because this is an exercise that I find really helpful. It's something that really works for me, and this is compassionate writing. The key exercise from compassionate mind training is compassionate letter writing, although I use the technique and perhaps the concepts behind, or perhaps the approach behind this exercise pretty daily, to be honest, writing in a journal. Personally, for me, writing about emotions, everyday challenges and depression can really help to bring some clarity and engage the compassionate self, fostering perhaps some of the compassionate wisdom and the encouragement I may need at such times. So the key intention behind compassionate writing in a compassionate way, is to acknowledge that we may be suffering or a moment of distress, and to help with managing that. And that clearly links into the definition of compassion that we covered in episode 1. So to start off with, it can really help to foster the intention and motivation to do the writing by sitting and undertaking doing the soothing rhythm breathing exercise that we covered in episode 5. It can also help to pause while writing, and particularly at moments if you find it's causing you some distress, to revisit that breathing exercise to help to re-engage the soothing system, and also the soothing place exercise that we covered in the last episode. So with this kind of motivation and our intention in mind, just sit and consider what the letter is going to be about, why you're writing it. It's going to be addressed to yourself, no one else will read it, so have the motivation, the courage in fact, to be as open and honest as you can be, and that can be challenging, I appreciate that. You do write it as a formal letter, so to address it to yourself, and one suggested part of this exercise is to do it in a couple of stages. So in the first part, acknowledge what the issue is, and this is trying to write this in a way that you might talk to a friend, or the words that you would use to someone who's struggling, so supportive and understanding. Then consider what you are feeling, and validate those feelings. So this can include acknowledging that this is a difficult time, or it's a challenge that you are facing, and validate all the feelings you have around that. This may include considering how your threat and or drive systems are playing a role, and it can be very helpful to acknowledge that some of those feelings, reactions, are part of the evolved way of thinking. So often the reactions, the immediate feelings are perfectly natural. As part of that as well, consider what you are responsible for, and I think just as important, what you're not responsible for within this situation, or the distress that you may be feeling. So the next stage is to start to move on to considering what thoughts and actions you could take, being guided from a place of compassion towards yourself and to any others that are involved. So what may be helpful within that part of reflection is to think about any challenges or barriers that may come up as well, what you could do if they do happen, and any support that you might need. And the final part of the letter is to close it off with a compassionate commitment, because often this will involve a change in terms of the actions you're going to take or thought processes, and that can be hard to sustain, particularly if it's to do with something that's very challenging or involves distress. So you're closing off with a compassionate commitment that is encouraging, it's coaching almost towards yourself. So there's no judging or criticising. This is coming with understanding and support. So that's a very quick step through a formal letter exercise. The last part of though is to then read the letter, which you may do straight away. You may want to put it to one side and come back to it a day or 2 days later. When you do come to reread it, again, bring that compassionate self. So don't judge how well you've written, how good the grammar is, the spelling. They don't matter. You recognising that you've written with honesty and openness to help address something which is causing you a distress. Now that may all sound a lot, and it's a suggested formal practice, but you can obviously tailor it to fit yourself and the circumstances that you're working through. You don't need to do all those sections, for example. The key thing is this is exercise to help you, so tailor it. I think the key points that I take from this exercise and I also use in daily writing is take time to do the writing. So don't rush and put some time aside. Take breaks if it's quite an emotional piece that you're working through. It can help to try and slow down, because sometimes, particularly if it's emotional, you want to write quickly. In Mary Welford's CFT book, she suggests putting some full stops in between so many words, which might sound really odd, but it is a great way of slowing down and just kind of bringing some pauses into the writing. Key thing is the writing is for you though, so write in a way that works for you. Don't worry about spelling or grammar. Sometimes it can also help to write in the third person. So again, if it's something that's very emotional or can cause distress, sometimes it can be very helpful to do that. Now, I've mentioned a few times I use this daily, and this doesn't mean I'm sending myself letters every day, which might be quite nice to do, but that isn't what I do. I use those kind of key points and the core motivation or the intention behind compassionate writing to write in a daily journal. That varies from day to day. Some days it can be very short, some days it can be longer. It can include very simple things that I'm grateful for. It might reflect on things that have happened. It could be more than that if I'm facing a challenge or something I really need to think about, or at times when that bout of depression is a little bit more active and I need to take time to work through that, because the writing brings a gentle encouragement and clarity, I find. I also find it hugely helpful to revisit old notes I've made in notebooks to reflect on previous difficult times, and which can act as a reminder of how you got through those periods. And it can obviously also afford hope when often that can seem lacking, because you've written it, this has come from you. And you know, it's just therefore so deeply personal. That can be such a great help. One little personal consideration that I'll share is that I treat myself to a nice little notebook and use a favourite writing pen for doing that kind of daily stuff, and if I do more formal letter writing, it just helps with the process. I guess it kind of provides me with this kind of positive and in a way a soothing setup, if that makes sense. So I've got a very nice little notebook and pen, and it just kind of helps. Now, as usual, I'll offer some links in the video description for some follow-ups. I don't usually share the compassionate letters that I have written, but I did recently share one, or early in this year I shared one on my blog, which I'll put a link to, which was actually a letter I addressed to lupus, which is an illness my wife suffers from. And I took a compassionate letter approach, or compassionate writing approach, to do a letter to lupus, which I found very powerful to do. I'm also going to put a link into a free document and guide from the Compassionate Mind Foundation. It's split into two parts. The first part is for therapists, the second part is from a client point of view, on how to do compassionate letter writing. So it's a really good guide, both from a professional and non-professional point of view. So the key thing I think I just want to leave you with is, no matter how or what you write, whether it's a letter, in a journal, a little brief note, keep in mind your compassionate self. So hold yourself with gentle encouragement and no judgment. And I hope you find it as useful as I do. Thanks for watching. Take care.